My name is Miriam Brooks, a 70-year-old black woman who has lived long enough to know that silence often carries more weight than words. But nothing could have prepared me for the sting of silence that fell across the chapel that day in California City when my daughter-in-law decided to make me her target. We were gathered to bury my husband, Harold Brooks, the man I had loved for 5 decades. The air was thick with grief, with hymns echoing softly against the stained glass windows. Yet, in that sacred hush, Savannah Reed, my son's wife, let her voice cut through like broken glass. "Lord, Mimi," she scoffed loudly, staring at my hands folded over the casket. "Even your nails look tragic." "It's embarrassing. Harold deserved better than this mess." "Sevens," gasps scattered across the pews. Her friends, Kendra and Tasha, snickered like they'd been waiting for this performance. My son, Darius, shifted uncomfortably, whispering, "Savannah, not now." But she was already feeding on the attention, her words dripping with venom. She didn't just insult my manicure. She slandered my family's dignity on the day we laid my husband to rest. And in that moment, as rage boiled under my grief, I vowed silently. She had no idea who she was truly provoking. What Savannah and her little entourage didn't know was that the tragic nails she mocked were painted with a polish from my own factory, one of the 3 plants I built from the ground up. I wasn't just a grieving widow in a simple black dress. I was the silent matriarch of a business empire. 19 nail salons across California City, 3 manufacturing facilities, and assets worth nearly $120 million. I had chosen to live quietly, driving an old sedan, wearing understated clothes, keeping my children in the dark about our true wealth. Why? Because money can buy polish, but it can't buy character. Harold and I had always agreed. Let them show us who they really are when they think we have nothing. Savannah thought she was laughing at a poor old woman with cheap nails. In truth, she was sneering at the very hands that signed her paycheck, the hands that held the OSHA compliance files, the MSDS binders, the safety protocols that kept hundreds of workers safe. I clasped those same hands tighter in my lap, letting her words pierce the room. On the surface, I was broken, silent. But beneath the silence, I was already planning, preparing the base coat for a very different finish. California City isn't just where I live. It's where I built my empire, brick by brick, bottle by bottle. To most people, nail salons are tiny corners tucked between grocery stores and laundromats. But to me, they are sanctuaries of transformation. A woman walks in with the weight of the world on her shoulders, and with a fresh set, she leaves taller, stronger, ready to face anything. Behind that glossy surface, though, is a world of discipline and science. Every one of my 19 salons and 3 factories runs on strict compliance. OSHA inspections, chemical ventilation systems, MSDS logs for every solvent and pigment. I trained my staff to respect safety as much as beauty, because polish isn't worth a thing if it costs someone their health. When I walk through my facilities, I don't see nail polish. I see pride. Rows of bottles in every shade imaginable, each batch carefully recorded, each formula tested like gospel. Savannah thought nails were cheap work, but she never saw the responsibility, the artistry, the millions invested behind those tiny glass bottles. That morning at Harold's funeral, she looked at my hands and saw weakness. What she missed was the empire those hands had built in the very heart of California. After the last mourner left, and the chapel doors shut behind me, I drove my old Honda back to my modest apartment. The world saw a grieving widow going home to a plain life. What they didn't see was the hidden door behind my bookshelf, the room Harold and I had built together, our true command center. Inside, the air smelled of leather and paper, the quiet hum of a locked filing cabinet waiting for me. On the walls hung charts of our nail salon's growth, floor plans of the factories, compliance certificates, and binders marked with MSDS labels. Every solvent, every pigment, every lacquer formula, logged and tracked to the letter. OSHA audits, safety drills, ventilation diagrams, fire suppression protocols. These weren't just paperwork to me. They were shields, protecting the hundreds of women who depended on me for a paycheck and a safe workplace. I pulled out a thick personnel folder with a name embossed in black ink. Savannah Reed. She thought she was just a sales associate, invisible in the grand scheme. But to me, every employee mattered, and every violation left a trail. I flipped through. Tardiness reports, a customer complaint about her dismissive tone, notes from a supervisor warning about her attitude. Harold used to tease me, saying I kept files thicker than the city courthouse. But he also knew. This was how I won wars without ever raising my voice. That night, as I sat at my mahogany desk, I called Janet Ortiz, my HR director of 15 years. Her voice carried the weight of loyalty and sorrow. "Mrs. Brooks, I'm so sorry for your loss," she said gently. "Thank you, Janet," I replied, steady but cold. "But tonight, I'm not calling as a widow. I'm calling as the chairwoman. I need you to review Savannah Reed's record. Every detail, every infraction." "Sevens." There was a pause on the line. Janet understood this tone. "Do you want me to prepare disciplinary documents?" "Sevens." "Not yet," I said. "We wait. Just make sure every OSHA violation, every time she disregarded safety training, every lapse with client respect is neatly in order. When the time comes, I want her to face the full picture of her own choices." "Sevens." I hung up and leaned back, staring at Harold's photograph on the shelf. "You always said kindness is not weakness," I whispered. "Well, Harold, it's time I show her the difference." Sevens. That night, grief hardened into resolve. My silence at the funeral wasn't defeat. It was the base coat. Smooth, invisible, necessary. And on top of that, I was going to paint the kind of color Savannah would never forget. In the nail business, nothing lasts without proper steps. You can't just slap on polish and expect it to shine. First, you sanitize, you clean, you disinfect, you strip away every trace of dirt. Then you lay down the base coat, the invisible layer that makes everything else stick. After that comes the color, the art, the statement, the part people actually see. And finally, the top coat, the seal, the promise that what you built will endure. I sat at my desk that night, staring at my own hands, the nails Savannah had mocked in front of family and friends. She saw nothing but cheap work. But what she didn't see was how those same steps of nail artistry had guided my entire life. Sanitize. Harold and I learned to clean our lives of poison early on. People who wanted quick money. People who thought success meant stepping on others. We removed them like dust before a new set. Base coat. Our foundation was discipline, OSHA binders, MSDS logs, safety trainings. We didn't just do them for inspectors. We did them because the base coat is where integrity lives. Invisible to outsiders, but everything rests on it. Color. That's the part Savannah thought she understood. She saw glamour, shades of red, chrome, glitter. She thought color meant status, handbags, Instagram likes. But real color? It's the artistry of service. It's the mother who spends her last $20 to feel beautiful for her job interview. It's the young girl saving tips for her prom manicure. It's dignity painted across 10 small canvases. Top coat. And here's where the true test lies. The top coat is commitment. It's not just about looking glossy. It's about protecting what's underneath. That's marriage. That's family. That's legacy. Harold was my top coat for 50 years, always shielding me, always sealing our work with his love. Savannah skipped every step in her own life. She never sanitized her envy, never built a base of discipline, never understood the meaning of true color, and never honored any top coat of loyalty. She thought she could chip away at me with insults, with arrogance. But I wasn't planning revenge and anger. I was planning a lesson, the same way I'd taught every new technician who walked through my doors. Step by step, layer by layer. Because when you skip steps, polish peels. When you cut corners, nails crack. And when you build your life on arrogance instead of respect, sooner or later, everything falls apart. That night, I promised myself one thing. Savannah would learn the process. Not just of nails, but of humility. I would sanitize her venom, lay down a base of truth, color her lies with exposure, and finish with a top coat of justice so clear, so strong, it would never fade. The morning after Harold's funeral, my apartment felt colder than usual. I was still sipping on black coffee when the phone rang. It was my son, Darius. His voice carried that mix of guilt and hesitation that every mother can hear. "Mom," he began, "I know things might be hard now without Dad, and I know Savannah can be—" He paused, searching for a word softer than the truth. "She just wants the best for the family. If you ever need help, financially, I can send you some money. Don't be shy about asking." Sevens. I smiled to myself, though he couldn't see it. My son offering me money when I could buy and sell his entire apartment complex 3 times over. "That's sweet of you, Darius," I answered gently. "But I'll manage with Harold's pension. You save your money for your future." Sevens. Later that afternoon, Nia came by in person. She hugged me tightly, her anger still simmering from the funeral. "Mom, the way Savannah talked to you, it was cruel." "I don't care if she was nervous or emotional. She crossed a line. Darius should have defended you." Sevens. I brushed a strand of hair from Nia's face. "Your brother's heart is soft. Sometimes too soft. He thinks avoiding conflict is love." Sevens. "Well, it's weakness," Nia snapped. "Dad would never have let anyone talk to you that way." Sevens. She wasn't wrong. Harold had been my shield in public, even when I didn't need one. But Harold was gone now, and it was my turn to stand. Still, I couldn't reveal everything. Not yet. I led Nia into the kitchen, speaking in the same calm tone I used with new employees learning to mix pigments. "Listen, baby. Sometimes people show their true colors when they think no one's watching. If I had stepped in yesterday, Savannah would have just covered her tracks. Now she's painted herself clear as day. Sevens. Nia frowned. So you're just going to let it slide? Sevens. Not slide, I said softly. Cure. Sevens. She tilted her head. You know how Polish has to cure under light before it's strong enough? That's what this is. I'm letting Savannah's arrogance cure long enough for everyone to see the cracks. Sevens. Nia studied me, suspicion in her eyes. You're planning something, aren't you? Sevens. I only smiled, sipping my coffee. Let's just say I never rush the process. You skip steps, you ruin the whole set. And I don't ruin sets, darling. I perfect them. Sevens. Later that week, while I kept my silence, Savannah made her move. She marched herself into one of our busiest salons in downtown California City, the branch managed by Min Nguyen, a man who had worked with me for over 20 years. Min had built that store like a temple. Polished floors, OSHA posters framed neatly by the breakroom door, every MSDS binder up to date. He was disciplined, loyal, and sharp enough to see trouble coming. Savannah, however, thought she could charm him. Mr. Nguyen, she said, sliding into his office without an appointment. I've been thinking. This salon has so much potential, but it needs fresh leadership. I have connections, style, ideas. If you let me buy into a share, I could bring real sophistication. I want to invest, to have skin in the game. Sevens. Min listened politely. He always did, but his eyes didn't flicker. He knew her type. All gloss, no base coat. I appreciate your interest, Mrs. Reed, he said evenly. But our franchises aren't open for outside investment. Ownership decisions rest solely with the chairwoman. My role is to manage, not sell shares. Sevens. Her smile cracked just slightly. But surely you can put in a word for me. I'm married to Darius Brooks. That must mean something. Sevens. Min folded his hands. It means your family, and family, more than anyone, must respect the rules. We don't bend policy, not for employees, not for relatives. Sevens. The word employees hit her harder than she expected. I could almost hear her bristle from miles away. She wanted to be seen as an insider, a woman of influence, not just a sales associate with a temper. Think about it, she pressed. If I had equity here, it would motivate me to bring in my clientele, to elevate the brand. Don't you want younger blood running these places? Sevens. Min stood, a quiet dismissal. What I want is consistency, compliance, and safety. This salon runs on discipline, not shortcuts. We keep every OSHA audit spotless. We track every chemical by the book. No exceptions. I'm sorry, Mrs. Reed, but the answer is no. Sevens. Savannah left with a polite smile plastered on her face, but inside, I knew the fire was burning. Rejection tasted bitter to a woman who thrived on appearances. She wanted to leap straight to the color stage. Flashy, visible, enviable, without ever building the base. That night, according to what Min later told me, she lingered outside the salon parking lot in her car, staring at the glowing windows long after closing. To her, those bottles of polish weren't just lacquer. They were power she couldn't reach. And so, the seed was planted. If she couldn't buy her way in, she'd find another way. A darker way. The kind of plan that ignored every safety protocol, every MSDS sheet, every ounce of common sense. Savannah didn't realize it yet, but with that rejection, she had chosen her battlefield. And she was walking straight into mine. It was just past midnight when Savannah made her move. The city streets outside were quiet, but the security cameras at our downtown salon caught every step. She slipped through the back entrance with a borrowed key, moving like a thief in heels. To her, this wasn't a crime. It was opportunity. To me, watching the footage later, it was a masterclass in arrogance. She headed straight to the mixing room, where batches of fresh polish were prepared for shipment. The room was spotless, lined with stainless steel counters, ventilation fans humming low, and binders marked MSDS stacked neatly on the shelf. The smell of acetates and pigments lingered faintly, a reminder that this was no place for games. But Savannah didn't care about OSHA protocols, or the safety signs warning. Wear PPE. No unauthorized personnel. Danger. Flammable. She wasn't wearing gloves, goggles, or even a mask. Instead, she rummaged through the cabinet, pulling down bottles of solvents and pigments like a child sneaking candy. Her plan was sloppy. Add foreign chemicals into the polish base, just enough to ruin the viscosity. If the batch failed, sales would plummet. In her mind, that failure would prove the company needed fresh leadership. Her leadership. I imagined her smirk as she twisted open the containers, pouring too much solvent into a vat labeled batch Dionefka 375, crimson rose. The thick, even liquid turned watery before her eyes, its once stable formula destabilized. She didn't realize that every ounce was logged, every ingredient traceable. The system wasn't designed to catch someone like her. It was designed to protect workers. But in the end, it would do both. For a moment, she paused, glancing at the wall where a large poster displayed OSHA's hazard communication standard. Right to know. Safety. First. She chuckled, muttering to herself, "Safety is for the poor techs scrubbing nails, not for me." Sevens. Savannah didn't see that in the reflection of the steel counter. A red camera light blinked steadily, capturing every careless move. She wiped her hands on a rag, left the containers half open, and walked out the same way she came in. To her, it was a victory. To me, when I saw it later, it was a fatal mistake. The night she painted her own downfall. Because polish, no matter how glossy, always reveals its cracks when the base is weak. The next morning, while most of the city was still shaking off its sleep, Min Nguyen was already at the downtown salon, clipboard in hand. Min wasn't just a manager, he was a soldier of discipline. I had trained him myself, and he knew that every great Polish line didn't begin with glamour. It began with routine. That morning, the routine saved us. As he entered the mixing room, the smell hit him first. Nail polish has its own perfume. Sharp, sweet, chemical, but consistent. This time, it was off. Too sharp, almost sour. Min paused, frowning. He pulled his mask tighter and switched on the ventilation system before walking over to the vat labeled batch, their 3075, crimson rose. The liquid inside didn't swirl the way it should. Instead of that smooth, glossy ribbon of color, it sloshed thin, watery, unstable. Min dipped the viscometer rod, lifted it, and watched the formula drip too fast. Instinct told him. Someone had tampered. He didn't panic. He went step by step, the same way I had drilled into him over the years. Sevens. Check the MSDS binder. He pulled it down from the shelf, flipping through the pages until he found the formula for batch number 3075. Every solvent, every pigment, every stabilizer was listed with exact ratios. Compare against the batch record. Min opened the logbook, neatly signed, each step time-stamped by the technician who had closed the shift. Nothing unusual was noted. Run a safety check. He tested the fumes with the handheld meter. VOC levels were higher than normal. Not enough to set off alarms, but enough to prove that unauthorized chemicals had been added. Secure the area. He sealed the vat, placed a bright red OSHA-compliant "Do Not Use" tag on it, and locked the mixing room. Only after all that did he allow himself a moment to exhale. Then he went straight to the security office. Together with the guard, they pulled the overnight footage. It didn't take long. There she was, Savannah Reed, strutting in like she owned the place, pawing through bottles without gloves, pouring solvents carelessly into the vat. The camera caught her every move, down to the moment she laughed at the safety poster on the wall. Min's jaw tightened, but his training kept him steady. He made a full incident report. Chemical tampering, breach of OSHA protocol, violation of company safety policies. He attached the footage, VOC readings, and copies of the MSDS sheets for evidence. By the time my phone rang, Min already had a thick file prepared. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. "We have a problem. A serious one, and I think you'll want to see this for yourself." "Sevens." I told him I'd come down personally. I didn't say much else, but in my chest, grief was slowly giving way to something sharper. Savannah thought she'd mixed a secret recipe for power. What she really mixed was her own undoing. By mid-morning, I walked into the downtown salon wearing the same plain slacks and cardigan I'd worn for years. No designer labels, no jewelry, just me. An old black woman people assumed was barely keeping it together after losing her husband. That was exactly the disguise I wanted. The salon was alive with chatter, the steady hum of nail drills, and the faint, familiar scent of acetone in the air. A young receptionist looked up and gave me a polite but distracted smile, the kind you give to someone you assume is there for a discount manicure. She had no idea who she was greeting. "Good morning, ma'am. Do you have an appointment?" "Sevens?" "No," I said softly. "I'm here to see Mr. Nguyen." "Sevens." She hesitated, eyes flicking over my simple clothes, but finally nodded. "I'll let him know." "Sevens." When Min stepped out of his office, his posture was all business. But when his eyes met mine, I saw the flicker of respect he kept carefully hidden from others. He bowed his head slightly, then gestured me inside. The office was spotless, OSHA posters lined neatly on the walls. He closed the door, pulled a thick folder from his desk, and set it in front of me. "Mrs. Brooks," he said quietly, "this is the full report." "Sevens." I opened the file. Photos of the contaminated vat, VOC readings from the handheld meter, MSDS sheets with neat annotations, and at the top, still frames from the security footage. Savannah's face was unmistakable, caught mid-laugh as she poured solvent into the polish. Min's voice was steady. She violated every rule in the book. No PPE, unauthorized access, tampering with hazardous chemicals. If OSHA gets wind of this, it's not just her. It could put the entire company under scrutiny. Sevens. I studied the photos one by one, my heart tightening with each page. Savannah wasn't just reckless. She was dangerous. She had turned my life's work, the empire Harold and I had built, into her playground. And if we go to court? I asked finally. Chemical tampering, destruction of property, OSHA violations. With this evidence, it's an easy conviction. She'd be looking at 3, maybe 4 years in prison. Sevens. I closed the folder gently, my fingers resting on the glossy, still frame of Savannah sneering at the safety poster. Outwardly, I stayed calm, just another old widow in a cardigan. But inside, I was steel. Thank you, Min, I said softly. Leave the next steps to me. Sevens. Because if Savannah thought she could paint over weakness, she was about to learn what happens when the polish is stripped and the truth underneath is exposed. It didn't take long before Savannah stormed into Min Nguyen's office, her heels clicking against the polished floor like gunshots. She wore her usual smirk, but the flicker of panic in her eyes betrayed her. Min motioned for her to sit, the folder of evidence resting squarely between them. I stayed in the corner, quiet, blending in as if I were just another older client who'd wandered in at the wrong time. Savannah, Min began, his voice calm but sharp, we have a serious matter. Last night, security cameras recorded someone entering the mixing room after hours. This morning, I found batch No. 3075 tampered with. Care to explain why you're on that tape? Sevens. Her laugh was too quick, too loud. That's ridiculous. Maybe the camera glitched. I wasn't anywhere near this place last night. Sevens. Min slid the still photos across the desk. Her face, clear as daylight, frozen mid-action, solvent bottle in hand. Savannah's smile faltered, but she leaned back, arms crossed. Could be anyone. Low-quality footage. You can't pin this on me. Sevens. You weren't wearing PPE, Min continued, unfazed. That's an OSHA violation, not to mention trespassing and chemical tampering. This isn't just company policy. You could be facing criminal charges. Sevens. Her smirk wavered, but she doubled down. So what? You're going to call the cops on your boss's daughter-in-law? Please. You'd be fired before you finished dialing. Sevens. For a moment, silence filled the room. I let it hang there, heavy, like the smell of acetone after a spill. Min finally spoke, his voice like a hammer. If this goes to court, the footage, the VOC readings, the MSDS logs, all of it, will bury you. 3 to 4 years, minimum. And don't think family ties will protect you. OSHA doesn't care who you married. Sevens. Savannah's face drained of color, but she turned her glare on me, as if I were the easiest target in the room. And why is she here? What's this old woman doing in the middle of my business? Shouldn't she be home knitting or something? Sevens. Her words stung, but only on the surface. I lowered my eyes, let my hands tremble just enough to sell the role. To her, I was just a harmless widow, humiliated again. But inside, I was already steadying the brush, ready to reveal the color beneath. It wasn't time yet. Like polish, justice needed patience to cure. I pressed my lips together, silent, while Min's voice cut the air like a nail file against acrylic. This isn't your business, Savannah. Not anymore. Unless you want to test your theory in court, I suggest you prepare yourself for consequences. Sevens. She shifted uneasily, her arrogance chipping like old lacquer. She still thought I was nobody. And that was exactly how I wanted it. The room had gone still, Savannah's denial hanging in the air like fumes from an open acetone bottle. Min looked at me, waiting for my signal. I had been silent long enough. I rose slowly from the corner chair, smoothing my cardigan, as if I were just another weary widow finding her balance. Savannah rolled her eyes. What now? You've got this old woman playing witness. Please. She doesn't even know what she's looking at. Sevens. I stepped forward, resting one hand on the thick folder Min had prepared. You're right, Savannah, I said softly. I don't know much about your excuses, but I do know this. Batch Nuster 375 didn't ruin itself. Sevens. She blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me? Sevens. Min cleared his throat. Savannah, this is Mrs. Miriam Brooks, the chairwoman, founder of these salons, owner of the factories, the reason you even have a paycheck. Sevens. For a moment, the air seemed to leave the room. Savannah's smirk collapsed. Her jaw worked soundlessly as she turned to me, eyes wide, as though seeing me for the first time. No, that can't be true. You live in a tiny apartment. You drive some beat-up Honda. Sevens. I met her disbelief with calm steel. Appearances deceive. That's a lesson you should have learned before mocking me at my husband's funeral. Sevens. I opened the folder, sliding out OSHA compliance sheets, MSDS logs, and signed safety training forms with her own signature at the bottom. These aren't just papers, Savannah. They're records. Every chemical we touch is documented, every procedure logged. You were trained on this. You signed acknowledgments. And last night, you violated every line. Sevens. Her hands trembled. I didn't. Sevens. I cut her off. You did. No gloves. No goggles. No authorization. You poured solvent into a formula meant for hundreds of women to wear on their hands. Do you understand the liability? The health risks? One allergic reaction, one hospitalization, and this entire company could have been crippled. All because you wanted to feel important. 7. Silence fell heavy again. I leaned closer, my voice low but unwavering. You thought you could humiliate me in public, strip me down to nothing. But you miscalculated. Because while you saw weakness, what stood before you was the woman who built 19 salons, 3 factories, and $120 million of assets from nothing but grit and polish. 7. Savannah swallowed hard, her confidence cracking like chipped enamel. For the first time, she realized exactly who she had been mocking all along. The next morning, we convened in the upstairs conference room of the main factory, a place I reserved for matters too serious to handle anywhere else. The long oak table gleamed under the fluorescent lights, OSHA posters lined the back wall, and a projector screen weighted with documents pulled straight from our compliance system. Janet Ortiz, my HR director of 15 years, stood at the front of the room, file in hand. Beside her sat Savannah, arms folded, lips pressed so tight they were nearly white. Min sat quietly near the door, witness and soldier, his report ready. I took the head of the table, my posture steady as a gavel. Janet began, "We are here to review the conduct of employee Savannah Reed, currently assigned to the downtown branch, following a serious incident of unauthorized access and chemical tampering." Her tone was clinical, but there was no mistaking the weight of the words. She clicked the remote. The projector lit up with still shots from the surveillance cameras. Savannah, plain as day, pouring solvent into the mixing vat. Then came the QA test results. Volatile organic compound levels, off-the-charts viscosity readings, photos of mislabeled bottles. Violation 1, Janet continued, her voice sharp. Unauthorized access to restricted mixing facilities. This breaches both internal policy and federal OSHA safety regulations. 7s. She clicked again. Violation 2. Failure to use personal protective equipment. No gloves, no goggles, no respirator, while handling hazardous chemicals. This endangers not only yourself, but anyone who entered the room after you. 7s. Another slide. Violation 3. Chemical tampering. By introducing unauthorized solvents into batch number 3075, you compromised product integrity, exposed the company to liability for allergic reactions, and violated the hazard communication standard under OSHA 29, CFR 1910, 1200. 7s. The room was so quiet you could hear the hum of the ventilation system. Violation 4, Janet finished. Repeated patterns of insubordination and disregard for workplace standards, documented in prior warnings. Tardiness, rudeness to customers, and dismissive treatment of colleagues. This is not an isolated act. It is a pattern. 7s. Savannah tried to interrupt, her voice shrill. This is overblown. Nobody got hurt. The batch was caught before shipping. You're all acting like I blew up the building. 7s. Janet didn't flinch. You don't understand, Mrs. Reed. Intent is irrelevant. OSHA doesn't wait until someone dies to take action. Tampering with hazardous chemicals is grounds for termination, prosecution, and civil damages. Based on evidence, if referred to authorities, you could be facing 3 to 4 years in prison. 7s. Savannah paled, her eyes darting toward me. You can't let them do this. Your family. You wouldn't let your own daughter-in-law go to prison. 7s. I held her gaze, unblinking. Family is built on respect, Savannah. And yesterday, you showed none. Not to me, not to my husband's memory, and not to the workers whose safety you gambled with. 7s. The folder of evidence lay thick on the table between us, every page a nail in the coffin she had built for herself. And for the first time since this all began, Savannah looked genuinely afraid. Savannah's fear hung in the room like a heavy cloud. For once, she had no clever retorts, no smirk to hide behind. Her eyes locked on me, searching for any crack of mercy. And there it was, the moment of power I had been waiting for. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands the way Harold used to when he was about to deliver judgment at the dinner table. Savannah, I said quietly, if this were only about you, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. The file would already be on a prosecutor's desk, and you'd be waiting in a cell. 7s. Her lips trembled. Then why are you even considering? 7s. I cut her off gently. Because of my grandson. 7s. The words landed hard. Even Min looked up from his seat. You've made it clear you don't respect me, I continued. You mocked me at my husband's funeral. You tried to humiliate me. And then you risked the safety of hundreds of women who trust our products. But there's an innocent child in this equation. My grandchild. He did not ask to be born into arrogance and lies. He deserves stability, a mother who is present, even if flawed, and a chance to see his parents rebuild instead of watching them shatter. Sevens. Savannah blinked rapidly, fighting tears, though whether from guilt or desperation, I couldn't yet tell. I could press for the full sentence, I said firmly. 3, maybe 4 years. And every day, you'd watch your son grow older through prison glass. But I won't. For his sake, not yours, I will speak to the authorities. I'll allow this to be reduced. 1 year. Enough to teach you consequences, not so long that your child forgets your face. Sevens. Her voice cracked. You'd let me off like that. Sevens. I shook my head. Don't mistake mercy for weakness. You will serve your time. You will carry the stain of this choice. But when you walk out of that cell, you will have one chance, only one, to rebuild as a wife and mother. Waste it, and you'll find no mercy left. Sevens. The silence that followed was heavier than any threat. Savannah lowered her eyes, finally stripped of pretense. I glanced at Janet. Draw up the revised documents. Inform legal. And make it clear, this decision is mine, and mine alone. Sevens. For the first time in years, I felt Harold's presence at my shoulder. He always said kindness was not weakness. Today, mercy was my top coat, a final seal, not for Savannah's sake, but for the child who bore none of her sins. That night, after the disciplinary hearing, my son Darius came to my apartment. He looked worn down, shoulders slumped, like a man carrying more weight than he could bear. I poured him coffee, the same way I had since he was a boy, though this time the silence between us was heavier than steam. Finally, he spoke. Mom, I owe you an apology. Sevens. I raised an eyebrow, waiting. At Dad's funeral, when Savannah said those things, I should have stopped her. I should have stood up for you. But I froze. I thought keeping the peace meant protecting the family. Instead, I let her disgrace you, and I let Dad's memory be tainted in front of everyone. I've been a coward. Sevens. Hearing him admit it, my chest ached. Not because of the insult, those I could endure, but because my son thought silence was strength. I leaned forward, my voice steady. Darius, you're not a coward. You're a man who forgot what true strength looks like. Strength isn't avoiding conflict. It's standing in it, even when your voice shakes, even when it costs you. Sevens. He nodded slowly, eyes wet. I see that now. And I don't want my son, your grandson, growing up thinking his father stayed quiet while his mother tore the family apart. Sevens. Then don't let him, I said firmly. Be the example. Show him that a man protects his family, not with fists, not with silence, but with courage and truth. He doesn't need a perfect father, Darius. He needs a present one. Sevens. He dropped his face into his hands. How do I fix it? How do I make this right? Sevens. You start, I said, by choosing what kind of man you'll be from here on. Savannah will serve her punishment. That part is done. But when she comes back, when life tests you again, you must be stronger. For your child, for yourself, for your father's legacy. Sevens. He looked at me then, eyes red but determined. I won't fail you again, Mom. Or him. Sevens. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Don't make promises to me,
Darius, make them to your son. He's the one who needs you to be better. Sevens, for the first time since Harold's death, I saw a flicker of fire in my boy's eyes. Maybe, just maybe, he was ready to step out from the shadow of weakness and into the strength he'd always carried inside.
Savannah reported to the county jail in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, her nails bare for the first time since I'd known her. No gloss, no acrylics, no glitter to hide behind, just the raw, chipped truth of who she was. At first, she fought it. Complained about the food, the scratchy sheets, the way the guards looked at her like she was nothing. She thought her last name, her marriage, her connection to me would give her leverage. But in there, no one cared who she was married to. She was just inmate Reed, another woman who had to line up, scrub floors, and survive. Letters came in the beginning. Short, defensive notes scrawled in anger. This isn't fair. You set me up. I don't belong here. I never wrote back. Some lessons couldn't be softened with words, but as months passed, the tone shifted. The anger faded into reflection. I miss my son. I never realized how selfish I've been. I hear women here talk about what they lost, and I think about what I almost destroyed. By the 6th month, her letters carried humility. I want to change. I want to come out of here better. I've been reading, taking classes. I finally see how I treated people, the same way I feared being treated myself. I want to be different for him, for Darius, for myself. When I visited toward the end of her sentence, she sat across the glass divider, thinner, quieter. Her eyes, once sharp with arrogance, were softer now. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, voice trembling, "I don't expect forgiveness. But I need you to know. I see it now. The pain I caused, the danger I created, and I swear to God, when I walk out of here, I'll be a different woman." Sevens. I studied her for a long time. 1 year isn't a lifetime, but it can be enough to strip someone down to the bare nail, enough to sand away the polish of pride until only truth remains. And for the first time, I believed Savannah Reed might be learning what no lecture could teach her. That respect, like polish, must be earned layer by layer, with patience and care. The morning Savannah walked out of the county jail, the air was cool and bright, the kind of California day that makes you believe in second chances. She wasn't in designer heels this time, just plain sneakers. Her makeup-free face showed lines I'd never noticed before, carved by a year of hard lessons. Darius stood by the gate, their son clutching his hand. The boy hesitated when he saw his mother, then broke into a run. Savannah dropped to her knees, arms open wide, tears streaming as she held him close. It wasn't the dramatic reunion of a social media post. It was raw, quiet, almost painful. When she finally looked up at Darius, her voice was low. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For humiliating your mother. For risking everything. For being blind to what really matters. I don't expect trust overnight, but I want to earn my place back." Sevens. Darius nodded cautiously, his jaw tight. "Words are easy. Savannah, it's what you do now that matters." Sevens. Later that evening, they came to my apartment. Savannah sat across from me at the kitchen table, her son perched nervously at her side. She didn't avoid my eyes this time. "Mrs. Brooks," she began, "I know I can't undo the damage I caused. But I need you to hear me say this. I was wrong. About the salons, about the family, about you. I thought nails were just nails. I never saw the discipline, the responsibility, the lives depending on it. And I never saw the strength in you until I tried to break it. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I deserved it. Sevens. I studied her face, the trembling in her hands. This wasn't the polished Savannah who once sneered at me from a pew. This was a woman stripped down to her base coat, trying to build layer by layer again. I didn't offer forgiveness right away. Instead, I spoke slowly. Apologies are the first stroke of polish, Savannah. But they don't shine without patience, without consistency. Show me who you are now, not through words, but through how you live.
Sevens. Her eyes filled, but she nodded. Yes, ma'am, I will. Sevens. For the first time, I thought maybe she meant it. In the weeks after Savannah's release, I kept my distance. I didn't want to be swept away by promises or pretty words. I wanted to see what she would do. At first, she stayed quiet.
No flashy outfits, no boasting about boutiques or connections. Instead, she focused on the small things. She cooked dinner for Darius and their son every night. She walked the boy to school instead of pawning the task off on someone else. She started volunteering at the church daycare, scrubbing toys clean, wiping down tables, disinfecting surfaces, work that no one bragged about, but everyone noticed. I watched all of this like a supervisor inspecting a new hire. Quietly, methodically, taking notes in my mind. One Sunday afternoon, she came over with my grandson in tow. He ran to me, giggling, clutching a drawing he had made at school. Savannah stayed back, carrying a simple casserole dish. No bakery cake with her name stamped on it, no attempt at performance. Just food, warm and plain, offered without a speech. Mrs. Brooks, she said softly, I don't want to intrude. I just thought you might like some company. And I thought maybe I could sit with you while he plays. Sevens. Her voice was lower now, her words careful. She wasn't performing for applause. She was simply asking for space. As my grandson scattered crayons across my living room floor, Savannah sat quietly, folding laundry with me, listening more than talking. When I asked her a question about her classes in jail, she answered humbly. When I corrected her on something about childcare safety, she nodded instead of snapping back. That evening, as she packed up to leave, I finally said, Savannah, you're not back in this family because of what you say. You're here because of what you've started to show. Keep your focus on him, your son, and maybe, over time, trust can grow again. Sevens. Tears welled in her eyes. She bowed her head slightly. Yes, ma'am. That's all I want. Sevens. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was the first step back into the circle, and for the first time, I could see she was willing to earn it nail by nail, layer by layer. It started with small things. Shortness of breath when I climbed the stairs, a cough that lingered longer than it should, a fatigue that even my strongest coffee couldn't chase away. At 70, I wasn't naive. My body was telling me what my heart already knew. Time was beginning to thin around me, like polish after too many washes. The doctors gave me medications, gentle warnings, and more appointments than I cared to count. But I had no fear. What I did have was urgency. I had built something too big, too fragile, to leave unguarded. The empire Harold and I created, the 19 salons, the factories, the brand, was more than money. It was a lifeline for hundreds of women who earned honest wages under roofs, where safety mattered. I couldn't let that fall apart when I was gone. One evening, I called Darius, Nia, and, hesitantly, Savannah to my apartment. We sat at the old oak table, the same table where I had once counted tips from my first tiny nail booth. Now, spread before us were binders, financial statements, OSHA certifications, MSDS compliance records, franchise agreements. "This," I said, my voice steady, despite the rasp in my chest, "is what I'm leaving behind. Not just wealth, not just property, but responsibility. Every signature in these binders is a promise. To employees, to customers, to regulators. Break that promise, and you undo everything your father and I built." "Sevens." Darius leaned forward, his face set with determination. "I'll carry it, Mom. I'll make you proud." "Sevens." Nia nodded. "Me too. You taught us both better than to let greed or arrogance stain the family name." "Sevens." I turned to Savannah. She hadn't spoken yet, her hands folded tightly in her lap. When our eyes met, she whispered, "I know I don't deserve a place here, but if you let me, I'll work. I'll prove myself. Not for me, for him." She glanced at her son, who was coloring quietly at the corner of the table. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I slid a thin binder toward her. "This is the daycare compliance manual for the salons. If you want back in this family, you start here. It's not glamorous. It's cleaning toys, checking MSDS logs for sanitizers, following every OSHA childcare regulation to the letter. If you can handle that, maybe one day you'll earn more." "Sevens." Her hands shook as she accepted it. And for the first time, I saw not pride, not defiance, but gratitude. I knew my days were numbered. But if polish fades, legacy does not, so long as it is sealed with the right top coat. I passed quietly one spring morning, sunlight spilling across the curtains, my hands folded just as Harold's had been when he left me years before. There were no crowds, no noise, just the steady hum of life moving forward without me. At the service, Darius held his son close, tears slipping freely. Nia stood strong, her hand on his shoulder, the same way Harold once steadied me. But what caught me, even as memory fades, was Savannah. The woman who once mocked me for cheap nails, now wept openly, clutching the daycare binder I had given her. She gave me everything, she whispered through sobs. And I wasted so much time not seeing it. Sevens. It wasn't wealth she mourned. It was the weight of my trust, the responsibility of carrying a legacy. A legacy sealed not in polish or dollars, but in dignity, discipline, and love. The lawyer's voice was steady as he read my will in the quiet of his office. My children sat side by side, their faces drawn with grief but sharpened by the weight of responsibility. "To my son, Darius," the lawyer read, "I leave the factories and the salons. But before you lead, you must serve. For 5 years, you will work on the floor, side by side, with the very people who keep our doors open. Only then will you inherit what I built." Sevens. Darius nodded, no hesitation in his eyes. "To my daughter,
Nia, I leave the investments and properties, with one condition. You must use a portion to fund scholarships for children of working mothers. Let education be our family's lasting color. Sevens. And then came the final line. To Savannah Reed, I leave guardianship of my grandson, with trust and conditions. Protect him.
Raise him with respect. That will be your true inheritance. Sevens. After the will was read, Savannah sat quietly, her hands trembling as she held my grandson close. Gone was the woman of arrogance, of cruel laughter in the chapel. What remained was someone humbled, finally stripped to her foundation. She kissed her son's hair and whispered, "Your grandmother believed in me when I didn't deserve it. I won't waste this chance. I'll raise you to be better than I ever was." Sevens. For the first time, her words didn't sound like performance. They sounded like truth. And in that moment, the story was no longer about betrayal or even revenge. It was about legacy, about how kindness, when paired with strength, can change even the hardest hearts. My empire wasn't just nails, factories, or money. It was discipline, respect, and the belief that no life is too small to polish into something beautiful. The lesson is simple. Respect is not bought with money or status. It's earned through how you treat people, especially when you think no one important is watching. So now, I want to ask you, Sevens, if you were in my place, would you have forgiven Savannah? Or would you have let her face the full punishment? If this story touched you, please like, comment, subscribe, and share it with someone who believes in second chances. And tell me in the comments, which city are you listening from? I'd love to know where my readers are joining me from. Because no matter where we are, from California City to your hometown, we all have one thing in common. We're building our legacies, one careful layer at a time.